about tangent and cotangent.
Good day guys, so now we will talk about graphing tangent and cotangent function. We know that y is equals to tan x and tangent x is equals to sine x over cosine x. So therefore, cosine x is not equal to 0 and x is not equal to x is equals to pi over 2 plus k pi where k is an integer.
So before anything else, let me discuss to you the derivation of the formula. So y is equals to a tangent quantity of b x plus c. A stands for amplitude. Then b stands for the stopping point. Then C stands for the phase shift of the center.
Given the equation of y is equals to tan x, we can now solve and graph it. First, we should get the period. And in getting the period, we use the formula of p is equals to pi over b. And in the equation, the b is the x. And x is automatically equals to 1. So, if b is equals to 1, the solution in getting the period will be pi over 1, then you simplify it, you will get pi. And then you can graph it, since this is now your period. And in the graph, it'll look like this. So, 1, 2, 3. This is going to be your pi, and then 2 pi. And then these 2 points will be your asymptote. Then you graph it like this, since this is a continuous graph. And now, these 2 points, the distance of these 2 points is pi. And then, in the domain, it's domain. Set of all values such that x is not equal to pi over 2 plus k pi, where k is integer. And then in the range, since this is a continuous graph, we have positive infinity and the negative infinity, so it's going to be like this. Negative infinity up to positive infinity. And in this equation, there will be no amplitude. Because of the infinities. So the next equation that we're going to solve is y is equals to tan 2x. We all know that this is the value of b, where b is equals to 2 now because it has 2 beside the x. And the first thing we're going to do is to get the period. Then substitute the value of b, it's going to be pi over 2. And now, this is going to be your period. And now, we're in the graph, it'll look like this. So this is your pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and then this will be your pi. And then the next one is 5 pi over 4, 3 pi over 2, 7 pi over 4, and then your 2 pi. Now, this is going to be your asymptote. Also your pi, 3 pi over 2, and the 2 pi. So, you'll graph it and you'll get the distance point. So now we have the period, which is the pi over 2. And now, the graph, it look like this. So, pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, pi, 5 pi over 4, 3 pi over 2, 7 pi over 4, and 2 pi. So, this will be your asymptote. So, broken lines. Oops. And then, this will be the graph. Compared to the other one, the graph is narrowing, and then it is continuous graph. So the domain is set of all x values such that x is not equal to pi over 2 plus k pi, where k is integer. And then the domain, the range, we all know that this is negative infinity and the positive infinity, so the range will be negative infinity up to positive infinity. Since, as I have said to the last equation, this graph is a continuous, so it has no amplitude. Considering the example we had, we can now denote the properties of the graph of y is equals to tan x. First is the period of the graph, which is the pi. Second is that the domain of the graph is set of all x values such as x is not equal to pi over 2 plus k pi, where k is an integer. The vertical asymptotes are in the form of pi over 2 plus k pi, where k is an integer. And the range of the graph is negative infinity up to positive infinity, because the graph of the tangent x is a continuous graph, that is why there are no amplitudes.
So now we're done with tangent. Let's move on to cotangent. Given that y is equal to cotangent x, the period is the same with tangent x, but the cotangent is the inverse of tangent. So if tangent is cosine x over sine x, therefore sine is not equal to 0 and x is not equal to k pi, where k is any.
So, given that y is equals to cotangent x, first we have to determine the period. And the period can be determined using the formula pi over b. So in this case, the b will be equals to 1. So dividing pi into 1, you'll get pi. So this will be the period of cotangent x. And if you graph it, it will be like this. So, as I've said, the period will be equals to pi. In this scenario, this will be the pi and this will be the 2 pi. And here, the negative 1 So, drawing vertical broken lines. If you want to add another vertical asymptote, you just have to add the first period to the next period. In this scenario, pi plus pi will be 2 pi. That's why the vertical asymptote is 2 pi. So when you graph it, it will be like this. The difference between the center of the graph will also be the value of the period. In this case, it is pi. And the domain will be set of all x such as x is not equals to pi and any even number where n is not equal to even number. Then the range will be negative infinity to positive infinity, because a graph of a tangent or cotangent function is a continuous graph. That is why there's no amplitude and the range is both infinities. So given an example, y is equals to cotangent x over 2. First, we have to determine the period. In determining the period, we use pi over b. So in this situation, the b is equals to 1/2. So when you divide pi into 1/2, you just have to reciprocate it. So multiply it to and multiply it to 1. So when you multiply, automatically the denominator will be cancelled. And if you multiply pi to 1, you'll get pi. And if you multiply pi to 1, you'll get... if you multiply 2 to pi, you'll get 2. So, and if you add them, you'll get 2 pi. So this will be the vertical asymptote of our graph. Now let's graph them. So given that we start on 0, we count 1, then 2 pi, 4 pi. The difference of the vertical asymptote should be the value of the period. In this given scenario, as I've mentioned earlier, it is 2 pi. So you add 2 pi to 2 pi, then you'll get 4 pi. And 4 pi will be the next vertical asymptote. So when you graph it, like this. Given that they are symmetrical, the value of this will be also the value of period, which is 2 pi. That's how to graph cotangent x over 2. So now we are done with graphing the cotangent x over 2. Let's determine the domain and the range. So the domain of the given formula is set of all x such as x is not equal to pi over 2 plus k pi, where k is any integer. Then the range will be negative infinity to positive infinity. As I've mentioned earlier, the graph of cotangent function is a continuous graph. That's why the range is both infinities and there is no amplitude.
So now, we're done graphing of cotangent function. We can now determine its properties. First, if this period is the same, which is pi, and the domain is the set of all x values, such as x is not equal to k pi. When k is any integer, the vertical asymptotes are the form of x is equal to k pi. K is any integer. The range is the same with the tangent, and it is negative infinite plus positive infinite. There is no y-intercept, and the x-intercept are y is equal to 0 and x is equal to n pi over 2. Where n is an odd number, the graph has no amplitude, also due to negative and positive infinite value of x.